Now, the United States has cut funding to the Wuhan Institute after it failed to provide documents related to coronavirus. So we are getting you this big breaking news that the United States has now cut funding to the Wuhan Institute after it failed to provide documents related to coronavirus. The Joe Biden administration has halted the Wuhan Institute of Virology's access to federal funding after the lab failed to provide documents about safety and security measures and related to coronavirus. The Department of Health and Human Services told the lab that it is seeking to cut it off permanently after a review that began last September. Now, remember, the facility is based in Wuhan, isn't compliant with federal regulation, and it won't receive any more federal funding from the United States. So we're getting you this breaking news right now that the United States has now cut funding to the Wuhan Institute after it failed to provide documents related to coronavirus. And the Department of Health and Human Services has told the lab that it is seeking to cut it off permanently after a review that began last September. CNN News 18's Abhishek Jha is joining us on this story. Abhishek, can you tell our viewers why exactly did the United States cut off funding to the Wuhan Institute?
We know that in US the debate has been very sharp now that whether the Wuhan Institute was somehow responsible for this whole COVID pandemic, because there are two theories, both very strong, that either the virus of corona pandemic escaped from the lab while the scientists were trying to engineer some different type of viruses. The thing is that the US has been doing a lot of funding to this institute, Wuhan Lab Institute. So clearly, US has now accountability to its own people, and that is why it is seeking some documents or reports from Wuhan Lab regarding those coronavirus, and in those days whether there could have been a possibility of this virus escaping and then spreading like a pandemic across the world, or there was some other reason, just to probe and to confirm that. But Wuhan Lab has not been providing with the documents even in the past, and it has insisted that there is nothing that it hasn't shared with the world, and it is trying to hide. In that context, US has now stopped funding to that lab because it is not giving enough accountability, and it is not showing enough evidences or documentary proof to the United States, where the taxpayers have been funding the research project of this whole virological institute.
So, Abhishek, what will be the implications of United States cutting off funding to the Wuhan Institute?
US has been engaged with a lot of bio, pharma, or biological or virological institute across the world. And the institute that we are currently talking about in Wuhan, it is a very high-end institute where the research does happen on the viruses, upcoming viruses. Probably some engineering of virus also happens, and that is the suspicion if something of that sort was being done, and then it accidentally got out of the lab. But now it seems that the US will not have that collaboration with that institute. Nevertheless, the institute will continue to operate, but the US collaboration with that institute will certainly go down, and this is going to be the first fallout of US funding being cut to that Wuhan lab.
Abhishek, can you also tell us what information and documents was United States seeking from the Wuhan Institute?
So clearly, United States was seeking evidences and documents regarding those periods when this whole COVID pandemic started. That is, in the November of 2019, this COVID pandemic started from Wuhan, from a market where the meat used to be sold. But now Wuhan lab has not allowed, even the international agencies and the WHO officials, they also tried to visit that virological institute, but they were not giving unhindered access. So there is something that Chinese government or that lab is not wanting the world to know, apparently, and they have also not let those documents that the US has been seeking for a very long time give to them. So the funding issue that United Nations, that US has now announced officially, has not been going there for the last 2 years. In fact, since July 2020, the funding has been stopped. But now the official declaration has come that the United States will not be funding that Wuhan Institute because of the institute not providing with enough documents related to overall COVID pandemic or the research regarding those COVID viruses, because COVID virus that is spread across the world, it is just one virus of the same family